We've got two major stories to break down today. The first one is all about a move the Packers are making because of a situation that's becoming impossible to ignore inside one position group. Then we'll shift to another story that's raising some serious questions about one of Green Bay's most important young players as the pressure keeps building at training camp. Both of these stories could have a bigger impact on this team's future than most people realize. And there are some details that every Packers fan needs to hear before jumping to conclusions. So stick around, because we're going through everything together. And before we get started, if you're a real member of Packers Nation, do me a quick favor. Hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and join us. My name is Victor, and Packers Nation Report is still a new channel. Our goal is to reach 6,000 subscribers. And I'd love for the fans who truly believe in the Green Bay Packers to be here with us from the very beginning. Let's start with the first story because this one developed out of necessity more than anything else. The Green Bay Packers are expected to bring back tight end McCallan Castles, according to Bill Huber of Sports Illustrated. And when you look at what's happening inside the tight end room, this move makes complete sense. Right now, this position group has been absolutely crushed by injuries. We already know Tucker Kraft is still working his way back after the ACL injury that ended his 2025 season. The good news is, he's progressing. But the Packers are understandably taking things slowly because he's simply too important to rush. Then things got even worse. Luke Musgrove has been dealing with a neck issue. RJ Maryland has been sidelined with a hamstring injury. And after Monday's practice, Matt Schneidman of The Athletic reported that Luke Lachey was seen wearing a boot and using a scooter after practice. That's obviously something nobody wanted to see. When you add all of that together, Green Bay was suddenly left with only 4 healthy tight ends available for practice. Josh Weil, Drake Dabney, Messiah Swinson, and Thomas Yasman, who is actually an international pathway player and doesn't even count against the 90-man roster. Think about that for a second. For an offense that loves using multiple tight ends, that's a dangerous place to be during training camp. You simply can't run productive practices when you're running out of healthy bodies at one of your most important positions. That's why bringing back McCallan Castles feels like the obvious move. This isn't someone completely unfamiliar with the organization. The Packers originally signed Castles last November after injuries forced changes at the position. Later, he landed on the practice squad injured list before signing a reserve futures contract after the season. He was eventually released before the 2026 NFL Draft, but Green Bay clearly never closed the door on him. In fact, just last week, the Packers invited several tight ends in 4 workouts, including Castles. Instead, they initially signed Thomas Yasman. Now, with injuries piling up even more, they're going back to someone who already knows the system and has spent time inside the building. That's actually a smart piece of roster management. Sometimes fans see these transactions and think they're meaningless. They're not. Training camp is all about maximizing reps. The coaching staff needs enough healthy players to evaluate everyone else on the roster. Without enough tight ends, it affects the offense, the quarterbacks, the running game, special teams, everything starts getting disrupted. As for Castles himself, this could be the opportunity he's been waiting for. He still hasn't appeared in a regular season NFL game. His football journey has been anything but conventional. He started at California, barely saw the field, transferred down to UC Davis. Rebuilt his career with nearly 1,000 receiving yards and 9 touchdowns over 3 seasons. Then finished at Tennessee, where he caught 22 passes for 283 yards and 5 touchdowns. After going undrafted in 2024, he bounced around with the Eagles, Chargers, and Rams before eventually arriving in Green Bay. NFL draft analyst Dane Brugler viewed him as one of the better undrafted tight end prospects coming out that year, praising his athletic background while noting he still needed to improve as a blocker and special teams contributor. Now, here's another interesting wrinkle. The Packers currently have a full 90-man roster. That means someone else will have to come off the roster before Castles can officially be added. So don't be surprised if we see another transaction announced very soon. And honestly, that's just life during training camp. Every injury creates another opportunity. Every roster move starts another competition. And sometimes players who look like camp bodies end up becoming meaningful contributors later in the season. Could McCallan Castles become one of those stories? It's way too early to know. But right now, Green Bay simply needs healthy players at tight end, and this move helps stabilize a position that's taken several hits over the past few days. Now, before we move to our second story, there's one more update that deserves some attention. Packers right tackle Zack Tom has officially begun going by Zack Bakabul, a name chosen to honor his father's Nigerian heritage. I honestly think that's a really meaningful story. He explained that he wanted a family name he could one day pass down to his children. One that better reflects where he comes from and the legacy he wants to build. That's something bigger than football. He's also continuing to recover from surgery on a partially torn patellar tendon and says he's hopeful he'll return to full team drills within about a week. Hopefully we see him back on the field soon, because everyone knows how important he is to this offensive line. Let's move to the story that's creating a lot more debate among Packers fans. Because the spotlight is getting brighter and brighter on Lukas Van Ness. When Green Bay selected him with the 13th overall pick in the 2023 NFL Draft, the expectation was clear. This was supposed to become one of the franchise's next elite pass rushers. A player offenses would have to game plan around. A player capable of changing games. But as we enter another training camp, the conversation hasn't been about dominance. It's been about pressure. Following Green Bay's first padded practice, Bill Huber listed Van Ness among the biggest disappointments of the day. Now, I want to be fair here. This doesn't mean Van Ness is having a terrible camp. It doesn't mean he's a bust. And it definitely doesn't mean we should panic after one practice. But it does highlight something that's becoming impossible to ignore. The excuses are running out. For the first 3 seasons of his career, everyone understood the patience. He was developing, learning, growing into the position that was reasonable, but now this is year 4, and the expectations have completely changed. This defense needs him. With Rashawn Gary no longer on the roster and Micah Parsons expected to miss the beginning of the season while recovering from his ACL injury, someone has to generate consistent pressure off the edge. Van Ness isn't just another rotational player anymore. He's supposed to be one of the answers. Unfortunately, his production so far hasn't matched that expectation. Across his first 3 NFL seasons, he's recorded only 8.5 sacks, including just 1.5 during an injury-shortened 2025 campaign. For a former top 15 draft pick, those numbers simply aren't where anyone hoped they'd be. The coaching staff continues to believe in him. They still love his size, his power, his athletic traits, and honestly, I understand why. The physical talent has never really been the question. The question has always been whether those tools can consistently show up on Sundays, because potential eventually has an expiration date. At some point, every first-round pick has to produce, and I think every Packers fan understands that. The encouraging part is that training camp is still young. One dominant preseason game, a few explosive practices, a couple of splash plays. The entire conversation can change very quickly. We've seen that happen before. But until then, every quiet practice is going to bring more scrutiny. Every missed opportunity is going to create more questions. And Van Ness knows it. Earlier this offseason, he said something that really stood out to me. He said, "Pressure is a privilege." I actually like that mindset, because he's acknowledging reality instead of running from it. He knows people are watching. He knows expectations are high. Now the challenge is proving it on the field. This summer honestly feels like one of the biggest turning points of his career. Not because one bad practice defines a player, but because this season could define how the Packers view his long-term future. If he breaks out, Green Bay suddenly feels much better about its pass rush. If he doesn't, difficult conversations are inevitably going to follow. And that's why these next few weeks are so important. Training camp may only be beginning. But for Lukas Van Ness, every rep suddenly matters. The reality is, this isn't just about statistics anymore. This is about trust. Can the coaching staff trust Lukas Van Ness to consistently win one-on-one matchups when the game is on the line? Can they trust him to create pressure if offenses decide to double-team someone else? Can they trust him to carry a bigger workload while Micah Parsons works his way back? Those are the questions that will be answered over the next several weeks. And they're questions that could shape the entire identity of Green Bay's defense heading into Week 1. As fans, it's easy to get frustrated when a former first-round pick doesn't immediately become a superstar. But player development isn't always a straight line. Some edge rushers take longer to put everything together. The problem is that the Packers don't have the luxury of waiting forever anymore. This defense has playoff expectations. The team believes it can compete with anyone in the NFC. And if that's going to happen, they need more players who can consistently affect the quarterback. That's why all eyes are on Van Ness right now. The talent is still there. The opportunity is definitely there. Now it's about turning flashes into production. Personally, I'm not ready to give up on him. I've seen too many players figure things out later than expected, especially at one of the hardest positions in football. But I also understand why fans are becoming impatient. When you're drafted that high, expectations come with the territory. And as Van Ness himself said, pressure is a privilege. Now it's time to embrace it. When you step back and look at everything we've covered today, you can really see what kind of stage the Packers are in right now. On one hand, they're dealing with injuries that are forcing the front office to stay aggressive and keep adding depth wherever it's needed. Bringing back Colin Castles may not be a headline-grabbing move, but it shows this organization refuses to let a thin position group become an even bigger problem. At the same time, the spotlight continues to grow on players like Lukas Van Ness, whose development could have a huge impact on how successful this defense becomes early in the season. Training camp is where careers change. Some players earn bigger roles. Others fight just to stay on the roster. And every single practice is giving us a clearer picture of what this Packers team might look like when the regular season finally arrives. That's why this time of year is so exciting. Every day brings another storyline, another competition, another reason to believe this team can take another step forward. There are still plenty of questions to answer, but one thing hasn't changed. This organization has talent. It has expectations. And Packers Nation will be watching every step of the journey, hoping this group can turn all that potential into a season we'll remember for a long time. Now, I want to hear from you. What do you think about the Packers bringing back Colin Castles? Do you think it's simply a necessary depth move? Or could he surprise people if he gets an opportunity? And what about Lukas Van Ness? Do you still believe he's ready for a breakout season? Or are you starting to worry about his long-term future in Green Bay? Drop your thoughts down in the comments, because I read as many of them as I can, and I always enjoy hearing what Packers Nation is thinking. If you enjoyed today's update, don't forget to leave a like because it really helps the channel grow and reach more Packers fans. And if you're new here, I'd love to invite you to subscribe to Packers Nation Report. We're still a brand new channel, and our goal is to reach 6,000 subscribers. So if you truly believe in the future of the Green Bay Packers and want to be part of this community from the very beginning, hit that subscribe button and join us. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you for being part of Packers Nation, and I'll see you in the next video. Go Pack Go!